back up a little bit so that we connect the dots. After you started going through therapy,
Hmm.
your brother and your sister, tell me what life was like. You told me bits and pieces, but your brother's now deceased. When did he die? And if you want to, tell us how he died, and then talk a little bit about your sister as well and your relationship um, in your family.
Okay, let me see. Well, remember I left and I ended up going to Children's Aid Society. So I
Yes.
was there for 3 years.
Okay.
I came out of Children's Aid Society, I had to be about 13, and ended up going to Patrick Henry um, for my middle school. When I went to Patrick Henry, we lived on Ada, which is off of Lakeview. And we hadn't moved over on 115th yet, but we lived on Ada. And there was my brother and my sister. Now, I was very close to Leroy. Leroy was the one who died. But also, while we were living there, my mom got pregnant again, and she had my baby brother, Kenny.
Okay.
Okay.
So was your baby brother?
Kenny is now here in Cleveland. Kenny, in fact, me and Kenny, we belong to the same church, St. Philomena's down here. So I see Kenny quite often. My sister lives in Cleveland. All of us still lived in Cleveland all our lives. We never moved out of Cleveland except for when Leroy went to the service. And that was the furthest apart that we had ever been, was when he went to the service. But my I became Catholic while living at Children's Aid Society. I decided that this was a faith that I wanted to join. And my mother had never made us join a church. She had always said, you get baptized when you find a church that you think you're going to like. So I had to be about 13, and I decided to become Catholic. I was the only Catholic in the family. But the funny part is that from that, my other members of the family decided to become Catholic as the years went on. My mother became Catholic. My brother became Catholic. Of course, I raised my kids Catholic. And as time went on, now I sit in the church and I've got like 4 pews of my family that all converted to Catholicism because they saw what a strong faith I had in becoming a Catholic. But at any rate, back to when I came back home, went to Patrick Henry. I was not popular at all. I was a short little fat kid. And then another problem was is that everybody knew everyone. By the time you're 13, you have your own little cliques. So I had to come in and try to fit and meet people. I met a girl. Her name was Margaret. What was her name? Margaret Burke. Me and Margaret are still best friends today. We're both 63 years of age. I'm her kids' grandmother, well, godmother to all her kids. Her kids will come over here. You know, if they have problems, they'll come and talk to me before. But that one friend that I met at Patrick Henry, to this day, we are still very close and very best friends. So that was the friend that I ended up carrying. I didn't have a lot of other associates. My mother didn't allow us to spend the night over other uh, kids' homes, but it was okay anyway because we weren't real popular. When I went to the 12th grade, that's when we moved over on 115th Street. My mom then met my stepfather, and they married. My stepfather is the main father in my life because my biological father, he would call from time to time. And then he came to visit me twice in the years that we were here before he passed away. But my stepfather, Jeffries Davis, is my heart. I mean, he ended up, although I was getting ready to graduate from high school and move on with my life, he was the one who bought my mom a home and made the family a family to get together. My grandma still lived with us over there until she died. But my father, he is what? He's 80, he's 84, 85. But he's still living there. Him and my brother Kenny, my baby brother. live over on 115th Street.
Your stepfather?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
And what did he do? What was his occupation?
He worked for the city of Cleveland.
Okay, and what did he do?
He was, well, he began by being a garbage man. And then he ended up going to streets, what's it, where they repair the streets and all. He worked there till he retired. And when he retired, he had never taken a day off of work. And they gave him a big award for never, ever having taken a day off in, 25, 30 years that he worked there. Never a sick day.
So you certainly had a very strong work ethic.
Absolutely.
Is that something that was passed on to you? Do you
Mhm.
feel okay?
To me and my son. Now, my son who's upstairs, who works for Handy Rent, he's 34 years old. He's worked for Handy Rents ever since he was 17 years of age. One sick day. And that's when he went to work and they sent him home. Never does he take a sick day off. If he's sick, he's going in and do the job.
Was that the same as when he was in school? You know?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Because I see a correlation between school and work, and that same ethic actually transfers over into the work world, and that's what I wanted to.
I gave my children, when they were coming up, because I just have the boy and girl, Ashley and Anthony, I gave them 3 personal days that they could take off from school. They knew the beginning of the year, you have 3 personal days. You don't have to cut school, because I never wanted them to cut or feel that they had to sneak. I said, but you have 3 days that you're entitled to. If you wake up and you just say, I just don't feel like going to school today. I'm going to watch TV or I'm going to do this. That's all you have to do. And I gave them 3. They never took them. They never took them. If they were sick, I'd have to say, no, you're not going to school today. You're not looking good. You're not feeling good. You're staying home. But the 2 of them never felt that they should take those days.
Wow. Now let's talk about when you moved to East Cleveland. I want to know all about it. If you remember moving day, when you first found out you were going to move to East Cleveland, where in East Cleveland you moved, and why, and all that.
Okay. My brother had come home on leave. He was in the Army, Leroy. He was in the Army and he had come home for leave. And my first husband, who's deceased now, Anthony Stedmire, Sr., had gotten a job. Well, they found out he had lied on his application and they told him, come and pick up his check. Well, my brother, who was on leave, had a car. And he came and he got my brother, he had gotten Anthony and me, and was taking us to get this check. My brother decided to come down the street. We had been looking at houses, and I didn't care if it was in East Cleveland. I didn't care. I really didn't even know about East Cleveland. In fact, I was scared of East Cleveland because we were told, you come in East Cleveland, you have anything wrong with your car, the police will stop you. You go to jail. You're going to get big fines. So I actually was kind of scared of East Cleveland, to come here because it was meticulous and the rules and regulations. But anyway, we had been looking for houses. I found a real estate agent. It was Annie Walt Real Estate. And it so happened Annie Walt was in East Cleveland. And I don't know how I happened to come by that particular one. So most of the houses that she was looking for were in East Cleveland. So I was saying, but East Cleveland is so strict. I said, but I do want a house. Well, she would give me these papers where you could bid on homes. And we were poor. My husband and I were custodians over off a street, off 105 called Lee. And we were custodians of that building. Anyway, I says, well, we'll bid on some of these homes. Every house we would bid on, we'd go look at. I wanted every house I saw, by the way. I don't care what it looked like. I just wanted to get out of this basement. I wanted to be able to see, what does daylight look like? So what I did was, I would I would stop and look at all these different homes. We were coming, my brother starts coming up the street, and I see this house, and it's empty. And I look, I said, oh, is that a pretty house? I said, I sure would like to have that house. I said, let's stop and look. So we pulled up in the driveway here, got out the car, we started looking through the windows, and I looked through the backyard. I said, this house is empty. I said, I sure would like to have that house. I said, this is so nice. I said, I'm going to talk to my real estate agent and see if she can tell me what's going on, how I can go about getting this house. We go get his check. I call Angela. I said, Angela, I said, there's a house on a street called Roslyn, 1825 Roslyn. I said, I sure would like to know about that house. I said, it looks empty. Angela said, okay, well, I'll see what I can do. She said, I don't have it on my listings. So Angela goes, and she calls me back like a week later, and she says, well, I canvassed the neighborhood, and nobody can tell me who owns the house or anything. So I said, you did? I said, well, I'm going to try to canvass. I'm not giving up. So I came on the neighborhood, and I went across the street over there. And over there was a family called Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And I said, can you tell me who owns that home across the street? So they said, well, that house has been empty about a year. They said the house was owned by this family, but they put the house up because their son killed someone in government downtown. I thought they said a judge, but they said that the son who lived in this house with his family had killed someone. The family, in trying to get him off and pay his legal fees, had put the house up and ended up losing the house. I said, well, do you know who they put the house up with? They said, we don't know. I had a friend who was the clerk of courts, Edith. I forget what her last name is. I went to her and I said, Edith, could you tell me who owns the property at 1825 Roslyn? So she looks it up, and she tells me that it belongs to mortgage company out off of Warrensville. I said, okay. I says, I'm going to go see what they want for this house. So she says, oh, Stephanie, it's got a lot of violations. She said, let me give you a copy of the violations. So she gave me this paper, and it had like 4 sheets on it, and it had a list of violations on it. But I says, well, I'm going to go see how much they want for it, you know, or if I can even see what it looks like inside. So I went out, found out who the mortgage company was, went to them, and asked them what they wanted for the house. So they asked me, you're really interested? I said, yeah. I said, so they told me the choice, they said, so here's what we'll do. You can get the house for, what was it, $12,000, or, I mean, as is, and you take care of all those repairs, or 16,900, and we'll take care of the repairs. So I said, okay. He says, because every time we do something, they always tell us that they need more done. That's the way East Cleveland's doing, because we're a finance company, so they think we have the money to keep putting into it. So I says, well, I'm going to go to 16,500. I says, I'll find a contractor and all, have them come out to the house. When I looked at the sheet and the list of things, you won't believe the silly little thing. There was not a major thing on the whole listing. It was things like, you need a rope for the window, you need a door stop over here. When we came in and we looked at this house, we couldn't believe it. So I got my house for $16,900, and today it's appraised at $79,000. No matter when I leave, it's a win-win situation.
Exactly. So what year did you purchase this?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I really couldn't say. I can look at my papers upstairs and tell you. Well, like I said, we've been in it about 38 years, so.
And your child, or can you remember by the ages of your children?
Well, my son is 34.
Okay, so the first
Okay, so he was.
him being in the house, he was about what?
Or better yet, wait a minute, 77, 76. I was still working at Lane Bryant. I moved in here about 1975. Because I was working, I started working at Huron Road Hospital December the 5th, 1977. And we had been living here for about 2 years because I was working at Lane Bryant downtown.
Good. So what was the street like when you moved into this house, and what was the neighborhood like?
Oh, the street was beautiful. Okay. It so happened my neighbors next door, also the Fraziers, they moved into their house a month before me. I had been approved for this house, but it took them like 6 months before I could get into it. The contractors, I fired 3 contractors because they would go somewhere else and work on somebody else's house and not finish what they were supposed to be finishing here. So I kept firing contractors that just wouldn't do what they had to do to get this house together. So finally, and the inspector came like 3 times to the house before I finally got angry and I said, look, I'm the one buying this. It no longer will belong to the finance company. I need you to give me a break. And sure enough, after he found out I was buying it, that it didn't belong to the finance company, the next week they sent me the papers. Well, the Fraziers had moved into their house next door. Oh, another thing I forgot to tell you. I went to real estate school because I didn't know anything about buying a house. So in the meantime, I started taking real estate classes so I could understand. And you had to take principal and practices in real estate law. And you had to have a real estate company back you in order for me to become licensed. So I got licensed. Annie Walt Realty backed me and I got licensed, and I learned, I just went and I only did it so I could learn about this property here. They had moved in. They were happy with their home. They had bought their home. The Salvation Army owned this, and they had, I guess, old veterans that used to live in the house over there. Well, they decided to sell their property, and they sold it to the Fraziers. Fraziers had 2 boys. I had 2 children who stayed here. Across the street over there was an older family, and they had 1 little girl. Then there were the Smiths. They had their grandchildren. Next door to me was the Rumps. And the Rumps, at that time, they had 4 boys and 1 girl. Shortly afterwards, their 1 son got killed out here in East Cleveland, shot to death. Every house had a rose bush because during that time, you had neighborhood clubs. And we had a neighborhood club that decided to have roses on everyone's bushes in the house. So I love that about the neighborhood. Another thing was that we really didn't have little children down here. The little kids stayed up at the top. This was like the first generation families that were in East Cleveland. Today, it's the second generation families. Unfortunately, the generation family that was there, and there, that second generation, their homes were repossessed. The kids couldn't take care of it. They didn't pay the taxes. Some of them had gotten second mortgages on the homes. So that's how Professor Parker ended up buying all these properties.
Parker, his first name?
Ed Parker, Professor Ed Parker, who he teaches art. Well, he was teaching. He's on a sabbatical, I believe, but he was teaching art at Tri-C. He moved over into our neighborhood, and first off, he took the building that's at the bottom. That used to be a nursing home. He took that building and he remodeled that building into an art gallery, and he has a little entertainment center inside, little stores, beauty parlor, and different things in it. He made a bed and breakfast out of the Taylor's home that was over there. The Smith's home, that's the one that he says he wants for veterans. And then in the Frazier's home next door, he made that into lofts. So it's a whole new group of people that are now living on our street. I'd say out of the homes that are on the street, I think we have 32 homes that are on the street. So anyway, we moved out here to East Cleveland. East Cleveland was beautiful. Back in those days, we had a bowling alley, we had a movie theater, We had Kresge's 5 and 10 cent store down here that cooked food. We had the A&P. We had Fisher Foods. We had factories. I still had a fear of East Cleveland because I knew that I had to have my grass maintained. I couldn't put up a fence around certain places. I even had to go to City Hall. I have 2 rails outside that look like 2 ranch rails, but I had to go and get permission to have those 2 little rails. I remember the council coming to my house to see where I wanted these rails put at. The whole East Cleveland City Council came here and stood on my grass, and they ended up saying, "This is what you want, 2 rails across here?" I said, "Yeah, that's what I want." And that's when they approved me to have the rails. We had the inspectors come to our houses, and they wanted to look in our houses to make sure that we were maintaining our property like they wanted this property maintained. City council was powerful back then. I think city council's a little bit weak now. I don't like the fact that I always, whenever we go, I see that the mayor and city council are at odds at each other. And I hate that. I don't recall that happening back in the day. And now they're fighting at each other all the time. So that I find to be a problem with both. I happen to like the mayor that we have at this time. I think he's doing a great job. I love the improvements that he's put into this community. So that's a problem. My fondest memory of East Cleveland, my children came to me, and they were about 7 and 8, and they said, "We're going to form a club." And they were in my backyard, and they had gotten the little rascals from around the neighborhood, and everybody was out there deciding to form a club. And I told them, I said, "Well, okay, if you're going to form a club, I'm going to help you, and we're going to do this right. We're going to have a president, a vice president, and we're going to really follow the rules in order to have a club, and we're going to have a purpose behind the club and all." Before I knew it, I had 50 kids that was coming to my house that all wanted to be in this club. And we called the club Kids in Play. We decided that we needed to raise money. So the way that we would raise money is that we started going around and telling the neighbors, "We'll put your trash cans out on the curb when it's trash night. If you need something at the store, you call one of us, and we will have somebody go to the store. We're going to be cutting your grass." And the kids made money from this. The neighbors got to know the kids. And the kids, half of them were from all over the neighborhood. That is my fondest memory. We would have Halloween parties out in the street. We would have, we formed a group together that we decided to do a garage sale. And in doing the garage sales, everyone who wanted to be in the garage sale just contributed $5. And then we put the ad in the paper, and all the neighbors got to know each other, and we walked up and down the street. Those are the kind of things that I love. We felt like our own little community. Like we weren't a part of just East Cleveland. We were like Mayberry, RFD, right here on this street. Those are the things that I feel were so wonderful. And then I saw the downfall of East Cleveland. I started seeing empty apartment buildings, people transitioning in and going out. I started seeing drugs coming into East Cleveland and them selling them. They were no longer afraid of the police. I was afraid, and I was a law-abiding citizen. I had one tail light out on my car, and I remember I was trying to get home at night, praying I didn't run into an East Cleveland policeman because I knew he would cite me. I have to go to court. I might have to go to jail. And yet we had people that were standing outside selling drugs, you know, doing what they wanted to do out here. And I just started seeing things collapse big time.
What do you think contributed to those changes that you were seeing at that time?
East Cleveland became a transit city. When I was doing my master's program, I did a paper on the downfall of East Cleveland. And I talk about the white flight that came about in East Cleveland when we had the real estate people come in and start telling the people in the neighborhood the blacks are coming. We find out that what happened was when the housing laws changed and you weren't allowed to be as strict as you were on your housing because they figured people needed places to live. Remember at one time you couldn't bring children into certain homes or into apartment buildings. Well, when the laws changed and they were told that yes, they can, then we started having people transition who didn't own homes. They started transitioning out here to homes and renting them knowing they weren't going to stay. They hadn't been taking care of their property. They're looking at, well, why shouldn't I have to take care of it? It's not mine. I got a landlord who's out here. The whites started moving out, and they were moving further and further out. More of the low-income blacks started coming into the neighborhood because they could now start to afford. The whites were gone. They figured, okay, well, we'll rent our property, and they become slum landlords. I'm sorry. And then as they started into these apartment buildings, they really started bringing in and transitioning the drugs that was coming in and out. So I enjoy doing a paper on the city of East Cleveland. We have over in the East Cleveland Library, there's an archive, and they actually have papers and things about the origination of East Cleveland and how it came about. And anytime I take an interest in something, I really get involved in it. And I found out that the borderline for East Cleveland started downtown on East 9th Street. Not East 9th, down just before you go over the bridge. That was the original East Cleveland. And then it moved to 55th Street. And the last border change, recognizing East Cleveland, came up here where Lakeview and East Cleveland is. And that was the last change that we've had. And in doing the history and the papers that I found over there, we found that all these streets, Shaw and Melbourne, these were people who came from different countries, and they moved in here and they started building in East Cleveland. And that's why the streets are named after those individuals that are here in East Cleveland. But the building of East Cleveland and how it came was extremely interesting. And I started checking to see more about it and how it happened. Okay, another reason I took the liberty to find out more about East Cleveland, Professor Knappersack was a magnificent professor at Mandel School of Applied Science. If it wasn't for Knappersack, I would not have been able to get my master's degree. Professor Knappersack went and got a Stokes Scholarship. And in order to get the Stokes Scholarship, you had to have an undergrad in social work, and you had to agree to go into the community development program at Mandel School of Applied Science. I was the first Stokes Scholar, and what I agreed to do was, once I got my master's, I would continue to work in the city of East Cleveland to give back to it, because it's a low-income neighborhood. So one of the ways that I could get that scholarship was to agree to be able to give back. And I've kept my promise. I'm still here in East Cleveland, and I've been here working in East Cleveland since 1977.
Have you had some real rewarding aha experiences as a result of that?
Absolutely. They just tore down Huron Road Hospital. And I worked for Huron Road Hospital for almost 28 years. I'm still working in the Stephanie Tubbs Jones building, which is, I guess they're trying to say, since they tore down the hospital, that services now have been taken over down there. I work for the East Cleveland school systems as a social worker within that. And to be able to see and live in the same neighborhood that people are getting health care in and education in, and knowing that I can be a part of that, and starting with the younger children, absolutely, it's wonderful. I now also see the growth of East Cleveland again. We are tearing down old houses. I see that the drugs, I don't see very many drugs going on in the city of East Cleveland now. I see that those buildings have been boarded up. I just see, like this organization here, you're taking an interest in East Cleveland, this is so magnificent. Everybody who comes in and takes an interest in us in order to improve us just makes me feel great. They have a couple of grants that they offer people so that they can, the homeowners, so that we can stay here and maintain our homes. One of them, I know that the one grant is that you can get your home remodeled or get things taken care of your home if you agree to stay for the next 10 years. And then after the 10 years, your loan is forgiven.
And
we,
did you decide that you're going to stay for 10 years?
I'm going to apply for it.
Apply for it? Okay,
Yes.
good.
There's the lead program, which I think that's all over Cuyahoga, but I know in East Cleveland because our homes are older and we do have lead in it. I was approved for the lead program, and I am going to. They give you $10,000 in improvement, and they can do it in windows. They'll do it in washing your walls down, repainting different areas, cleaning up your home. But there are ways to keep your property so that these people can stop abandoning these properties and leaving them. We see that we've now united with University Circle. We got the health bus that's comes all the way to Windermere and takes you all the way downtown. We have CMHA that is building homes that are affordable homes that are out here. You know, I see that we are now doing so much better. And I gotta say, this is from the last two mayors. I don't care if the last mayor dressed up in a woman's wig. It's still, he did something for East Cleveland. So I see us going up and getting better every year.
I want to go back to what you were talking about in terms of the white flight and what
Okay.
was going on with the realtors, the words on the street at that time. Do you have any personal experience with that, or know anyone personally who was contacted by anyone in the realty, any realtor giving them information or misinformation?
Unfortunately, this was before my time.
Okay.
I only know from what Dr. Knappersack had expressed to us and telling us that that was the downfall of East Cleveland, was that the realtors then would start telling one neighbor, your home next year is not going to be worth what it's worth. You know, we've got these people, and they would say these people moving in. And they're not going to take care of their property, so you need to start moving. And you would start seeing, they tell me, these for sale signs on all the property. Well, the realtors decided to go up in Cleveland Heights and try to do the same thing. Cleveland Heights stopped it. For a long time, you couldn't put a for sale sign on your property in Cleveland Heights. In fact, I'm not sure if you're still able to, but for a long time, you weren't allowed to put it, because then that keyed the other neighbor, well, they're moving out, so we want to move, we're going to have people that we don't want to come into the neighborhood. With the changes that are going on now, and with us now hooking up with University Circle, they're saying it's getting better and better, because you'll see that the building is coming down further. Now they're at Lakeview doing the new building remodeling. And I remember Professor Parker told me a year or two ago, he said, Steph, don't sell your house yet. I said, really? He said, trust me, University Circle is going to come all down this way, and your house is going to be worth quite a bit. Well, I don't plan on selling my house anyway. You know, I'm very happy here in my house, but to get it redone would be nice.
Well, certainly you've talked about how race and racism have impacted the city of Cleveland. Has it impacted you at all personally?
In East Cleveland?
In East Cleveland.
You know what? I was raised kind of weird. When I went to Children's Aid Society, I was the only black. Well, because I was bright and I wasn't a troubled child, they let me go to school off campus. I didn't go to school on campus there. Only problem was, again, blacks were not on the west side, so I was the only black at Landon Elementary School. From Landon Elementary School, I went to Wilbur Wright. Wilbur Wright now, I understand, is 50% black and white, but there were only two blacks, me and another boy who actually was biracial. So for me to be, I just never saw, I don't see my color. I can be in an all white place and I don't see that I'm black. I'm the same as that person who's in there. I'm a female woman in with a group of women. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't see prejudice. I don't feel uncomfortable. I feel I am everybody's equal. If I'm in with a mess of Chinese, I'm just as Chinese as you. If I'm Jewish as you. This is the way that I came up many of my years. And I was the only black. I was never called nigger. I was never called Negro. I was never called black. I was called Stephanie. And I guess it was a warning given to everybody when I came in, you know, we're going to have an African American. I think we were called Negroes then, back then. But we're going to have a Negro girl coming in. We better not hear you say anything offensive. And I never, in all the time I was over there, I just didn't feel segregated from anybody.
And so when you graduated, you went on to college after you came out of went to high school?
Glenville.
So you attended Glenville.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you in terms of how you related to your peers, in terms of your whole high school?
Okay.
Time? How was it?
Well, I was a fat nerd, so I wasn't popular at all. When it came time for the prom, my cousin took me to the prom, thank goodness. I had a male cousin that he could take me to the prom. But again, me and Margaret, we were best friends. You know, I wasn't the popular one, but I was the smart one. And the kids would always want to copy my homework. I have a friend now, she's grown, she said, you remember Stephanie? She was so rotten, she wouldn't let us copy her homework. She'd tell us in a minute, I stayed up and I did my homework last night, you need to be doing yours, and wouldn't let us copy it. I didn't realize that that was, you know, keeping me from making friends. I probably could have made some more friends had I done that. But basically, I was a smart nerd. And I guess because I didn't have boyfriends and I wasn't going to the games and things like that, it caused me to study. That's what made me. It's not that I was so smart. It made me study to give me something to do. I could put all my energy into that. I ended up at Glenville because I first went to the old Glenville, which was off of 105. We closed that class out, and I ended up going to the new Glenville that they built over on 116th, I think it is, in St. Clair. We were the first class to go into the new Glenville. And I'm still active with our alumni association. We do scholarships for the kids so that they can go on to college. Clifford Gregory, I know Cliff well. He also belongs to St. Agatha here off of Lakeview. But he was one time, he was the president of it. So I actually know more of the people I went to school with now than I knew or associated with when we were in school.
So when you graduated from Glenville, where did you go?
Okay, well, I was in a program at Glenville. It was called the COE program, Coefficient Office Education. Again, because I was advanced in my studies, by the time I was 16, I actually could have graduated. My mom told me nobody's going to hire a 16-year-old, so you're not coming out of school yet. So what I ended up doing was getting on a program where I went to school. I took like 2 classes in the morning, and then they found me a job. They found me a job at Lane Bryant, Coefficient Office Education, where I worked in their office. When I graduated from Glenville in '67, Lane Bryant asked me to come on full time. Now, I graduated with a scholarship, a full scholarship. Unfortunately, I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school. My family had no idea what it meant to really go to college or to get a college education. We weren't pushed to go to college. My mom was just happy that we didn't get pregnant like she did and drop out of school, which would have been an expectation the way that my family was coming up and all. So I get this scholarship, but I had a job at Lane Bryant full time. So I says, well, I'll go to Tri-C. What the heck? So I started going to Tri-C, but I got bored with Tri-C. And they offered me a job as assistant collection manager at Lane Bryant. So I dropped out of high school. I dropped out of college. And I dropped the scholarship and all. And I could have gone to Ohio State. I really had no idea how much money my scholarship was for me or how much I had made in being able to get this scholarship. So I dropped out and I didn't go back for, about 15, 20 years. You know, I think I was 50 when I got my master's degree, because I didn't understand until I started working at the hospital. When I worked at the hospital and I saw different individuals and they were in different job settings, and I'd say, gosh, I'd like to do that, especially social work. Oh, I'd like to do that, and I can do that. And I was connecting people to different things. I says, I'd like to do it. And they kept telling me, well, you need to get a degree. And I said, well, where do you get it? I mean, this is how ignorant I was. My family didn't understand. The day that I got my master's degree, my mom, she had tears in her eyes and she was saying, this is wonderful. She says, what does this mean? And I said, well, Mom, I'm kind of like at the top of my education in understanding. I says, I've mastered this particular field. I should know just about everything there is in this field. I says, the next thing for me to do would be to get a doctorate's degree. I said, so she says, a doctor? You can be a doctor? I said, oh yeah. She says, how can you be a doctor? I said, well, not a medical doctor, Mom. I said, you get a doctorate. And I was actually explaining education to my mom, where she didn't understand. You know, she was just as proud that I got a high school diploma. We were just as proud that I got a high school diploma. And when I decided to go back to school, and the reason I decided to go back to school to get my master's was because I was going to divorce my first husband. And I knew I had 2 children to take care of. And I needed an education that was going to pay me enough so I could take care of these 2 children and let them live differently than I lived. You know, I wanted them to be able to go to camp, to go on skiing trips, to go on boating trips. Even if they didn't like it, I tried to keep the poorest side of me that they had to understand and the richest side of me. I wanted them to be able to make those determinations. With my first husband, he didn't work. He'd disappear for months at a time. We'd get our gas turned off, our lights turned off. Part 2 of my book, when I make it. I learned how to turn my lights back on. I'd go out there and learn how to screw off that bulb and take the cellophane off, and the lights would come back on. My children never knew how poor we were. When the gas was cut off, we'd burn the fireplace. I'd tell them, okay, we're going to have camp out night. And we would put up our blankets, and we had the little tents, and we'd sleep down here, and I put the wood in the fire so that we would be warm. When we didn't have food, we were going down here to these dinner places, and I said, we're going to volunteer. You guys need to know how to volunteer. We volunteered because I knew we could get food to eat, because I had gotten laid off. This man wasn't working. He wasn't supporting us. And I decided, I says, I'm not going to live like this anymore, God. I says, I have got to get rid of this man, and I have got to move on with my life and take care of my kids. And when I decided to do that, I divorced him. God stepped in and said, I got you. I got you here. Got me scholarships to colleges, had me go on. When I finished my bachelor's degree, I said, well, I'm going to see what this master's degree is about. God stepped in again. He said, I'm going to pay for every bit of your master's degree. I'm going to make you a Stokes Scholar. I'm going to give you this education. And sure enough, that's what he did. And I did my master's in the 18 months. I went back and I was able to get 2 degrees from that. You know, 2 masters in that. So I finished that. I decide I'm going to do therapy. God steps in again. He says, you know what? Why don't you go into education? You're going to have to go back to school for another year. I'm like, well, do I want to do that? Because, see, you still have to, even though I had my master's and everything, I still had to go back to another year and get this education in Baldwin-Wallace. So I went to Baldwin-Wallace, and then I had to get licensed to be a school social worker. So blessings, as you said earlier, sit back, and they just kept coming and coming and coming and coming. This house was a blessing. This street was a blessing. You know, everything just keeps coming more and more and more.
Well, you certainly have been blessed in so many, many, many ways. And I want to take you back to where you were talking about East Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to think back to a memory or instance or instances where the community fought for something.
Ooh, this is a historical street. If you'll notice, our street is different than any of the other streets that you see. At the beginning of our street, you'll see there's these two giant pillars. And people will come by and say, why have you got those two pillars out there on the bottom of the street? Well, when Hafiza Omar, she lives 3 streets down, she was president of city council. She decided that she wanted to do some investigating and found out that we could become the historical street. This street, and I think it's the next 5 or 6 streets. And there was funding for that. So what they wanted to do was to take our homes back to the 1900s. Those 2 pillars were supposed to have an arch to go over. We were supposed to have this street and the last street of the historical streets and our homes with those pillars and the arches, showing you are now beginning to enter the historical street.
And what made it historical?
Because of our homes and the way that our homes are made and the richness in the wood that we have inside of our homes. In making it historical and taking it back to those 1900s, we are told we can't change any of the structures on our homes. We must keep them just the way they are. Even the painting has to be a certain color for that period of time. They wanted to do the whole street in red brick. They were going to put those pillars up, the archway. Each house was going to have, you see, we have the old-fashioned lights that look like old-fashioned gas lights. One was going to be in front of every house. There was going to be a bench in front of every house. Unfortunately, the money was, I understand, taken by our mayor. When that was, I don't know which was the mayor. We've had 2 mayors that we've had problems with, so I don't know which one of them took it at that time. But what we ended up doing was we got 5 of those lights out here. They wanted us to pay for each light that was going to be put out here. This is when we had the uprise. We said, no, we're not paying for that. They wanted us to pay for everything that they had said. They had these models down at the community center, so you could go down there and we could see our own little homes and how the street was going to look. But when the money was stolen, they wanted us to pay for the brick. They had also done new sidewalks up and down Roslyn, so they had torn all that up and put new sidewalks in. They wanted us to pay for that. Instead of putting the red bricks, they put it, if you look at the bottom of each corner, you'll see they just took the corners and put red bricks in, which was horrible because now the bricks are falling out. People are tripping and falling as they get to the corners of the brick street. So we fought and we said, we're not going to pay for something that the mayor took. You know, why should we end up paying for it? So that's why we never got the arch to go across. Professor Parker designed the top of those pedestals and the bottom. He designed and drew up how they should look and all. But we never did get the rest of that done.
About what year are we talking about?
Oh, I really don't know. Oh, I was trying to see if I could acquaint it to something.
Was it, you mentioned the possibility of 2 mayors. That would have been, what 2
Well, Anawar, I know it wasn't Anawar.
Okay.
Definitely wasn't Anawar, and I
But it
forget.
was before
Oh
his
yeah,
administration.
well before him. It was before Anawar, and I think it was before Cummings. I mean Davis, because Davis is still down here in the. He never went to jail. He never did anything. It had to be between Davis and Anawar.
Anwar did serve time because
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. When I say served time, I know he served time and he did admit to taking funds.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted, since it's being recorded, I just wanted to make sure we were talking about a certain period of time or, you know.
But it wasn't that Anawar, Emmanuel Anawar I knew very, very well. His first wife was my sorority sister. She died. That's the one whose husband, her son killed her. Remember, Anawar went to jail. It was just horrible, horrible. Anawar was in prison. His son killed his mother, Diane Anawar. And, but I knew them very, very well. So no, he wasn't the one who was involved in us becoming the historical street.
Okay.
It was before his time.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you talked earlier about how some of the surrounding institutions, in particular Huron Road Hospital, how that impacted East Cleveland, and as well
Mm-hmm.
as how it impacted your life then and now. Can you think in terms of what was going on with some other institutions and how it impacted East Cleveland?
Only like I say, the community development department um, through Case Western Reserve. They actually had individuals come out here and see what some of the needs were needed in East Cleveland. So I know that they've worked well with community development and with our mayor in East Cleveland. Ed Parker, of course, his little businesses that he has going on, I think that he's been a plus in our community. The mental health, the job, mental health right here for retardation, that's a work site for them. When I first moved out here, that was a car dealership. And now they've actually have children who are, not children, adults who are mentally challenged that work there and get paid to work there. So that's a plus for East Cleveland. GE is still here. In the GE, we have a school, an independent school that's very well known now and getting more and more. It's a middle, it's a high school that's up there. That's a plus. All of our schools have been remodeled, and all of our schools now in East Cleveland are nice and new. What I do regret, though, is that we don't have anything for our young people to do. We really could use something for our young people to do. Some kind of activities and involvement. We have the Shaw, not the Shaw, what is it, Martin Luther King Civic Center, but it's kind of dilapidated. I don't see a whole lot going on over there anymore. I just wish we had more things to do in the community for our younger people.
So what's your vision for the future of East Cleveland? And what do you feel, you've hit on some major issues that need to be addressed in order to better the neighborhood. But please tell us more.
My future, you know what? I'm excited because I see new things coming. Every time I see a new building coming up, it just gets me all excited. What I don't like is that we seem to be the quick food capital of the world. There's no healthy eating here in East Cleveland. We've got all these little ragged quick food restaurants that aren't quick food. You got to wait in line. I hate going here to not IHOP, White Castle. I don't care what time of day I go. I'm in that line for 25 minutes. That bugs me.
And why?
Because Why do we need all this? First off, we suffer as blacks. This is the biggest black community in America. We suffer with diabetes and high blood pressure. I don't see one smoothie shop down here. I don't see one exercise. I exercise every morning. I have to go up to Cleveland Heights. Why is it I don't have a fitness center down here? I've got a vacant building, so why not put a fitness center down here that we can work out in? But we suffer with high blood pressure and diabetes. The area is primarily black. We've got a lot of young children, and what do we have? We're killing them with these quick food restaurants. They'll also put up a cell phone shop around here, you know, so that we can buy these cell phones. I hate this grocery store. I refuse. I don't even want my shoes to walk on the little nasty floor that's the grocery stores around here, much less me buy some food out of it.
So East Cleveland is essentially a food desert.
Absolutely. That's what they think makes us happy. You know, but we have $2 stores now. We have Deal and Dollar General, and we have another one. So some of the things that are bettering, like I said, the thing that I like now is that I'm seeing abandoned buildings torn down, and I'm seeing fresh housing coming up. Community gardens. I think that is wonderful. I think we need to get more people involved in our community gardens. I'm scared that any day now the farmers market is going to be closed down. I love going to the farmers market because we don't patronize it like we should. And when we don't patronize things, then they close and go away. But I think those are wonderful things. I think we can get our kids involved in gardening. I started a Cub Scout group at Mayfair Elementary School. And one of the things that they said they wanted to do was to start a garden and to work in a garden. And I just think it would be so wholesome that we do start these gardens and that they're able to taste something that they grow. Or flowers. You know, pull the flowers, set up flower beds and things. I love City Fresh. City Fresh is at Stephanie Tubbs Jones on Tuesday evening. And they have food that come in from the Amish. There's another one that the Amish are bringing food to that I was going out to. They're over there on 260th Street. I don't have to go on 260th now. I can just go downstairs when I finish seeing my clients and get something from City Fresh because everything is fresh. And I think these are things that I'd like to see more of in our communities. When they tear down these apartments, why don't we get that particular street to say, hey, why don't we do a garden here and make fresh food for us to eat? I think that would be something that we could have positive in our neighborhood and give our young people.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And what would you be prepared to do to participate in making East Cleveland better?
Whatever they ask me to do. I need to know where they want my skills at. But I'd be more than happy to contribute whatever I can, especially to the young people.
Stephanie, thank you so very much for this marvelous interview. And it is definitely 10 steps forward in terms of helping us alleviate some of the difficulties that we are faced with in East Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't say enough how appreciative we are. Thank you.
And I thank you that someone wants to listen. And I hope something comes of this.
Very interesting story. Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.